Imagine it's 1987 and your dad has just brought home one of these as a courtesy car while he was getting his 316i serviced at the dealership. And the only thing you can think of sitting in that back seat is how incredible it is that your dad is able to drive a literal race car for the road. Kind of. So while you're sat in the back seat, it becomes your dream. You want an M car one day, and almost 30 years later, you might be able to achieve it and get something like this. The only thing is that this is not called an M3. This is a G87 M2, but in my opinion, it should be an M3, because this is a lot more of a spiritual successor to this car and some of the M3s that came in between than any other M3 or M4 that there is. Now you might think it is a bit of a stretch to say that these cars are quite similar. There is 30 years of a difference, and I think we need to remember that unfortunately cars are just getting bigger, and even stuff like a Polo nowadays is the same size as a Golf was maybe 20 years ago. And I think there's something to be said for having cars stay relatively in the size class they were in. In my opinion, BMW really did this little car really dirty. This should have been called an M3. It had all the right to. It has a similar wheelbase to the original E30 M3. What is it? Half a foot of the difference. That's bigger, yeah? It is rear wheel drive. It puts out more than enough power and makes you feel like you're driving on a knife's edge, just like an M3 should. But they didn't. And I think that's the exact reason, that kind of naming convention is the exact reason why BMW had so much hassle last year with the new M5. If they called that car an M6 or an M7, nobody would have batted an eyelid. I'm just really sad that this little car got called a hairdresser's car because it had a 2 in the name. Don't think it deserved that. In my opinion, if you're mindful of the fact that there's almost 30 years of a difference between both of these cars share quite a lot when it comes to philosophy. And one of the first places you can see that is in terms of the looks, the aesthetics, but also the wheelbase. The wheelbase makes a massive difference when it comes to the driving dynamics and allows both of these cars to feel quite short and snappy. And in a world where every car is getting much bigger and much longer to accommodate more comfort, I think that's quite a special thing. We don't really see many short cars that have a lot of power anymore. As well as that, both of these cars share one thing in common, and that's that they don't really make sense. They're both kind of ridiculous cars. They're not very practical. They kind of are in a sense, but it's kind of a false practicality. You're not really going to fit anyone in the back seats of this, and if they are, they're going to be quite cramped. You do get back seats in the back of this as well, but again, you're going to be quite cramped. The E30 M3 was a homologation car, and the rules for Group A dictated that you needed to build at least 5,000 models of the car before it could be raced. Under the bonnet, the E30 M3 got a 2.3 litre 16-valve 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine, which was known as the S14. And this put out 200 horsepower, which might not seem like a lot today, but bear in mind when this car was new, most normal cars had maybe 50 to 75 horsepower. Breaking the 100 horsepower mark was a lot, not a mind breaking the 200 horsepower mark. The original E30 M3 was a car praised for its scrappy little high revving 4-cylinder, as well as 50-50 weight distribution, which gave it excellent handling. And the best part is, it looked almost identical to the race cars that you saw on the TV. But if we take off the rose-tinted glasses for a second and remember that even your mom's diesel car probably accelerates quicker than this does, it's hard to imagine how that original formula could have been improved. But the BMW engineers knew that they could improve that formula, and they did so throughout the 90s for the E36 and the E46 generation, when they realised that if they didn't have to worry about the homologation rules that the E30 M3 fell under for Group A racing, they could kind of have a bit more freedom. So they gave the M3 2 extra cylinders, and with that quite a lot more oomph and also quite a lot more refinement. After the E36 and the E46, things started getting a lot bigger in terms of the size of the car, but also in terms of the power level, because the engine itself would get 2 extra cylinders again, this time in the form of a V8 to compete with its arch rival, the Audi RS4. After the V8 M3s, things went back to being a 6-cylinder, but this time they got a turbo. And with that, the power increased even further and the cars got bigger. And for the first time, the car that started life, the M3, that started life as a 2-door coupe, well, the 2-door coupe was no longer called an M3. It was now known as an M4. And I think with that, it really started to lose the essence of what an M3 initially was. Don't get me wrong, an M4 and an M3 are incredible cars, the current generation and the generation before. It doesn't feel quite the same, does it? When the G87 M2 was first revealed, there was a lot of hate for it. and I don't think it deserved all of it. Personally, from the front, I would choose this over an M3/M4 any day of the week. I think this looks a lot better, and the more time you spend with it, the more you end up liking it. Of course, this M2 is bigger than the E30, but at the end of the day, everything has grown. And if you think this is big, wait until you see this car's actual successor, the M3/M4 of the current generation beside him, because this ends up looking absolutely minuscule. Proportions wise, I think this car does things correctly, and it has the curves and edges in mostly the right places. The front of the M2 is quite flat and has quite a lot of geometrical designs to it. And again, the more time you spend with it, the more time you actually end up appreciating it. And similarly enough to the original E30, well, that itself has a very, very flat front. The arches of the M2 are wide. So wide, in fact, that if I put my phone here, it's not going to fall off. And I don't think there's many other cars that you could do that to. And because of those wide arches, you also get a bit of a Coke bottle design, which you got on this as well, where it kind of smooths around, gets narrower in the middle, and then gets wide again. This does that even more pronounced. But my favorite little part that you don't really ever see on camera or on videos or in photos is the rear arch, because if you look at it almost directly from above or as you're getting into the car, you can see there's quite a bit of a curve to it and a lot of flatness that again doesn't come across really well on camera. And in my eyes, that curve and the way it has that curve is quite similar to the curve of the E30 M3 arches, although a lot less boxy. I think the biggest issue is the taillights. I think the taillights have too much kind of curve and swooshiness to them, and I do wonder if this had got more like squared off taillights, would it have looked a lot better? I think so. Maybe it should have got a lot more squared off taillights like this. Well, those are basically just pure rectangles, so maybe we wouldn't have gone that far, but I think there could have been an element of that in this. Now, I've driven a couple of E30 M3s before, and honestly, they drive as you expect them to. They're not incredibly fast, they are only a 200 horsepower car, but they're fun and it's part of the experience, and they're little snappy things. You love having them on back roads. Probably wouldn't love having one on the Autobahn because it's not, you know, that's not what the car is made for. There's other cars for the Autobahn, and even in that time, there would have been the likes of the M5. This is just a really, really good back road basher, not that you're going to do it with the values of them nowadays. And I think that's where this comes in as well, because in today's terms, maybe this has the same kind of appeal. So I've already driven quite a few E30 M3s, and it's fast in comparison to other cars that would have been around. I think context is always really, really important, but it's never going to be anywhere as quick as the M2 is. But I don't think it needs to be. I think the charm of this car is what it stood for, what it was, and what it would have been at the time in the 80s. I think the charm of that car is the fact of what it is nowadays and today. And I think that's what makes it quite special. So let's hop into that one that we can enjoy a little bit more than this prized classic E30 M3. Oh, and that's with traction control fully on. I love this thing. So good. If you had seen like a time lapse of my week with this car, there would have been a lot of moments like that, a lot of little giddy moments. Now, it does do everything you expect of an M car. It goes well, it stops well, it turns well. Incredibly well, in fact. For a car that's out of the box, this is fantastic. And it even sounds really well too. Especially around this point, 3,000 to 4,000 RPM. Around the 4,000 RPM mark, it really starts singing a full 6-cylinder tune. A really nice tune. And a tune that I can really, really get used to. And that's not even full throttle. That's just having a little bit of a play with my right foot. A lot of the time when I film videos with cars, I have to imagine cars the way other people would enjoy them, the people who would actually buy them. This is a car I don't have to imagine. I enjoy this massively. And so much so that I kind of would almost set my sights on one of these. It might seem a bit odd that I'm comparing a 2025 BMW M2 with 480-ish horsepower to the likes of an E30 M3, which is a 4-cylinder, or an R32 GTR, which is 4-wheel drive. But I think there's elements of both of those cars that still ring through in this. And as someone who loves old school cars and loves 90s cars and has a firm appreciation for everything that happened in the 90s, there's something about this car that tickles me. And the best way to describe it is to shift down a couple of gears and do that. Because there's a way that this car puts down its power that feels very similar to the Skyline. Yes, it's a ZF 8-speed box rather than a manual, and you can get these as a manual. Main thing that sticks out to me is how this twin turbo setup in this car with the S58 and this amount of power, the 480 horsepower, is exactly what you need. It's probably a bit more than what you need, but I think that's what makes this car enjoyable. It's the potential. It's not quite as quick as an M3, but it also doesn't have front drive shafts, and it also doesn't have as long of a wheelbase. Inside in the cabin here, it's quite compact, the same way it is in an old school car, such as a Mark IV Supra or an R32 GTR. And this kind of body shape with this kind of size, I like this. It is incredible, incredible fun. And I think the fact that it's a short wheelbase gives it that kind of old school vibe that I love. It's like a little terrier. It's quite a snappy little car. But unlike the M3 and M4, which are larger cars and with longer wheelbases, it'll probably snap out on you a bit sooner. It's more eager to snap. But I think when it does snap, it's easier to save as a result because you don't have as much of a pendulum effect happening. You can kind of quickly correct. And this itself is 1.8 tons. This car weighs more than my Audi A8 D2, which has a 4.2 litre V8 from 1995. This car weighs more, but it doesn't feel that way. The A8 is a boat, this is definitely not. And BMW has really managed to kind of engineer out the weight as much as possible. It's, as you can tell, it's an eager little thing. In the mode we currently have it in, it's downshifted twice. It just wants to go. It's an eagerness that a lot of modern cars are quite tamed and muted, even if they are performance cars. ZF 8-speed box, brilliant gearbox. I know people will complain about them and moan about them. I like them. I think they're really good boxes, and there's a reason you're seeing people putting these gearboxes into high horsepower Mark IV Supras now, because they just put the power down really, really well. The gearbox is quick, it's snappy, the engine is eager and wanting to pull, and when you take it out of the sports modes and you go back into turn off the valves, it just becomes a normal car. It does drink a bit more than your regular car. I think on the drive down from Dublin to Killarney, when I collected this, sitting at 120 kilometers an hour on motorway, it was doing about 9 litres, just over 9 litres per 100 kilometers. But as soon as you put it across into a sports mode and start putting the shoe down, it does start drinking. And at the end of the day, can you blame it? There's 480 very thirsty and very hungry horses, but at the end of the day, the people who are buying these aren't expecting necessarily diesel fuel economy out of it, and they have the money to spend, because in Ireland, these are upwards of €120,000, and that's a fair chunk of change. It's probably the press car that I've spent the most on in fuel, probably because I've also enjoyed it the most out of all the cars. It's not necessarily that I've done the most mileage in it. On the interior, you get this Alcantara steering wheel with blue and red stitching denoting the M, little 12 o'clock marker here. Looks like carbon fibre, not sure if it really is. M badge here as well, flappy paddles up and down, and you get an M1 and an M2, but an M1 is currently programmed to be like a little bit more of a mild sport mode, and this is like all out sport mode, so that changes the engine into, let me see, go to setup here. You've all these different modes, and so that puts the engine in Sport Plus, and then you can change chassis and all of that. You also get carbon fibre here as well. One of my favourite little features is to put it in reverse. I think this is only on the M cars. To put it in reverse, you go over and up, which is where reverse would be in most normal BMWs anyway. Nice little shift lever, and it's nice that it's this rather than the little kind of toggle switch you find on most BMWs nowadays. But again, I think this is only for the M cars. Seats wise, you get these lovely M2 kind of bucket seats. This part does actually light up at night, and they've this nice little flag in the door as well. Again, that lights up as well. I think it's a nice place to be, and this part in particular feels very BMW. I think it's something BMW is losing a bit. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of this kind of skateboard style, or this kind of big design of the screens. I know it's meant to look like there's this essentially one screen going across, but you can see here it's a break between the two. But at the end of the day, it works. It does its job. It's probably not the cleanest integration of it. There's something that kind of feels like the blend of modern and old about this setup, and maybe having it integrated a little bit more would be a bit nicer, but maybe that's a bit too kind of mid 2010s. Maybe this will actually look better. Now, unfortunately, climate control is locked in inside these menus, so that's a kind of a downside. There's no reason why they couldn't have put it down here. You do get to control your volume here with a knob, and you also get forward and back buttons here for music, which again, why couldn't you just put even just a shortcut to the climate controls? I know you can do turn on your rear demister and your front demister as well, but again, it's a shame. You do get this kind of lighting here, which is all the usual stuff you get on most modern cars. I do like the fact that you do still get like an iDrive system here, and the fact that you don't have to fully just be in the touchscreen. But again, I would just love if the climate control was down here. But to be honest with you, there's probably not as many complaints about the interior of this car as you might expect. It is a modern car in 2025, so we do have a lot of hard plastics around the place. Hopefully that's a trend that kind of goes soon. So I guess, what are my takeaways from the week with this car? And the biggest one is we need more cars like this. We need more cars like this that have to make compromises. Compromises in terms of packaging and how practical they are for the sake of pure enjoyment. We don't all need a four-door saloon. We don't all need an estate. We don't all need four-wheel drive. We need more tools that are good for the jobs that they do. And this is a perfect example of that. And I think, unfortunately, over the next couple of years, we're going to see stuff like this get rarer and rarer, whereas I think we should be going the other way. There's a bit of an old school charm to this car that it's hard to imagine unless you're sitting in the driver's seat of it. It feels probably the way it would have felt to drive something like an R32 Skyline during the 90s would have felt. Probably what it would have felt like to drive a Supra throughout those eras as well. There's this absolute shove of power that kicks you back into your seat, makes the wheels spin, and kind of makes you forget that there's much technological assistance in the way trying to stop you. There's no hybrid system. It is pure raw combustion. There's something beautiful about that we're going to lose soon. And I think it's not just about the drivetrain. I think the drivetrain is one part of that. Even with traction control on, it still spun the rear wheels. Again, this is such a giddy little car, and it makes me so giddy as well. But I think we need more cars like this. In short, I think we need more cars like this that have that kind of feel, have the feel of having a short wheelbase, have the feel of being a bit ridiculous, not incredibly practical, because that's what puts a grin on our face. Because at the end of the day, a jack of all trades is a master of none. And this, well, this is as close as it gets from BMW to probably having a really good, fun car that has that feel of the 90s. So let me know if you think this should have been called an M3, and maybe the M3 should be called an M5, and the M5 should be called an M7, and in which case maybe wouldn't have all of this mess of people complaining about BMWs being too heavy and too big, because maybe it's actually just a naming problem rather than a size and weight problem. Big thank you again to Brian from BG Motors for giving me this for today, and also to BMW Ireland for giving me this for a week, because this thing is bloody mega. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure to like, share and subscribe, and we'll talk to you as always in the next video. Cheers, take care, bye bye. Oh, and that's with traction control fully on. I love this thing. So good. Sorry, the car in front of me is about to hit a ditch, and I can't stop getting distracted. What I will say though is it probably wins the prize for the car that I've had to refuel the most, because yeah, we're down to 14 kilometers again, and it's saying full drive power not available for full drive power, refuel soon. So yeah, we're back at a petrol station. I put in €30 worth of fuel, and that's all I've ended up with. So I wonder how that happened.